like some of you perhaps, I blame my mother. She modeled a world that didn't exist. My father died when I was 3, so she, a beautiful young widow, a Holocaust survivor, a French literature professor, was the only parent I ever knew. I thought all women were like her, working, parenting, and running everything. I didn't know that she defied all the rules of her time, and I would spend much of my life trying to get to where I thought I'd started. We humans have such short memories. We only experience our own lives. And so we all think, and the more so the younger you are, that women have always earned a living, loved freely, owned their own property, that men were always present at the birth of their children, that they shared the caring and sometimes even the cleaning that went on at home. And yet, all this is startlingly new. There are 4 forces transforming our world. I like to call them the 4 W's. Web, weather, world, and women. The first 3 you've heard masses about for a lot of years. Web, the technological revolution that's reshaping our minds, bodies, and businesses. Climate change, weather, the issue that if we don't get a handle of, all the rest of our conversations will be pointless. World, the forces and reactions to globalization. And the 4th W? Women. The steady, dramatic, and powerful gender balancing of our world. The 4th W is rarely set alongside the other 3 as the equally radical change agent I believe it to be. And yet, it's impacting the life of every man, woman, and child on the planet. Many people, and especially many women, are incredibly impatient with the pace of change. The media is full of pay gaps and glass ceilings, Me Too and mansplaining. Yet after thousands of years of human history, in a lightning fast 3 generations, we have turned the world upside down. Our grandmothers got the vote 100 years ago this year in the UK. Our mothers got the pill just 60 years ago. And many in my generation got a good job. In 2010, women became the majority of the US labor force. So the 20th century has seen the extraordinary, unprecedented rise of half the human race, women. The challenge for the 21st century is the adaptation of what I call the 3 C's: countries, companies, and couples. We're only partway through this millennial shift, and some countries are barely moving, and everywhere change is uneven and unequal. How do we get all our daughters to enjoy the fruits and not the backlash of this shift? And just as important, how do we get all our sons to thrive in a more gender-balanced world? Not by expecting it to happen naturally. From where we've come to sharing power between men and women, from male dominance to gender balance, there's nothing automatic. This is a testament to human enlightenment and evolution. And it takes a huge amount of these 2 things, will and skill. Without fierce determination and the policy, pressure, and follow-through to make change happen, it doesn't. And without the skill to predict all the sensitivities, the backlashes, and the issues to manage, the change doesn't stick. So let me give you an example from each of my 3 C's. Countries first. What we're seeing is some countries, like Canada and France, are totally gender-balanced governments. 2 countries have even flipped to having female-dominated parliaments. Finland and, wait for it, Rwanda. Only 4 countries have no women at all. Sweden requires that fathers take parental leave, while Saudi Arabia has only just allowed women to drive. Government policy drives culture, and countries can't balance without really strong leadership, laws, and policies. One example that really affects all men and women at the national level, and also, by the way, at the couple level, is the question, what do we do with the kids? Some countries address this issue head-on, and others ignore it completely. There are still only 3 countries left on the planet that have no paid maternity leave at all. Any idea who they might be? Papua New Guinea, Suriname, and the United States of America. Countries that still force women to choose between children and work found a generation ago that women chose children. Now they choose work. Women are voting loudly with their wombs. The good news is that means that birth rates all over the world are falling. It means that parents are actually choosing to have the number of children they want and can love, usually 2. But in some countries now, birth rates are falling too far, leading to aging populations and falling demographics. Countries that still ignore the reality of 2-income couples and try and stick to old and obsolete gender roles, or don't find ways to conciliate work and family, will find they no longer have families. That's what Japan is seeing right now. While progressive countries are replacing maternity leave with parental leave, or even better and broader with family leave, allowing us to take care not only of our kids, but of our aging parents too. Smart countries redesign policies to create balance. They try to ensure that everyone can learn and work and love. The rewards? Competitive labor forces, healthier demographics, and happier people. The second of my 3 C's is companies. Like countries, for a long time, they've been run mostly by men. Now we're seeing a shift from very male-dominated, top-down, hierarchical pyramids to more flatter, networked, gender-balanced pomegranates. While 35 of the world's top 100 companies still don't have a single woman in their top teams, the majority do. Why? Because some companies believe that gender-balanced leadership helps grow business performance, and others don't. Some companies embrace future trends, others simply choose to ignore them. Yet women have been streaming into labor forces all over the world for decades now. Women now represent 60% of university graduates globally. They make 80% of consumer goods buying decisions. Their income, education, and independence are driving talent and market realities all over the globe. Smart countries embrace them. So my day job is working with leaders in companies that are really betting on balance. I spent 2 decades working with thousands of men and a few women on executive teams that are really anchoring what gender means for their business. And they're working to eliminate sustainably everything from glass ceilings to sticky floors. My overall takeaway from this? It's usually the first time these executives have ever spent any real time in a safe, politically incorrect discussion with their peers about gender. It's not that they're bad or even indifferent. Most of them are really committed to change and progress. But they are unaware, unaligned, and unskilled. Can't blame them. They've grown up in a male-dominated world and ended up leading in a much more gender-balanced one. They need information more than accusation. If you want a gender balance in the 21st century, it's not women who need to lean in. It's leaders. And they're going to need some new skills to do it. A lot of companies have tended to frame gender as a woman's issue or a diversity issue. And they've tasked women with sorting it out. We've thrown a lot of time and effort at what we call Fix the Women programs, aimed at getting women to behave and sound a little bit more like men. Men think that gender balance really is none of their business, or they're convinced that their systems are fantastically meritocratic and that talent rises naturally to the top, even if no women do. Most of the managers I work with will proudly claim that they are gender blind, when what we actually need are managers who are gender bilingual, who have a deep understanding of the differences between men and women and are good at getting the best out of everyone. Instead, we often task the out-group to solve a problem intrinsic to the in-group. So what we're looking for is leaders to defy gravity, with the will to push relentlessly for change and the skill to drive it through. It's not harder than any of the other big challenges we're facing: technology, sustainability, or globalization. But it takes the same level of will to get it on the agenda and the same level of skill to roll it out. So countries, companies, and finally couples. Our most intimate relationships are also being transformed by gender balance. We used to marry for power, property, procreation. Then women became more educated, more independent, and let's face it, ladies, more demanding. Now we marry for love, admiration, mutual self-fulfillment. We choose mates who share our education, values, visions, and ambitions. When I ask my students at the business school where I teach, what do they want to create in their partnerships? 80% of them say they want a dual career couple with 2 kids. So we're seeing the emergence of some of the happiest, most balanced couples the world has ever witnessed. But like countries and companies, this also takes will and skill. Designing dual career models that work equally well for both partners is no easy task. And most of us are still in experimental mode. We're trying to move away from the single earner and lead career models that still dominate at the upper echelons of most organizations. We're going to need new models that craft something together. The best see 2 careers as 2 elements of a single system with a unifying vision for life, which allows couples to design complementary rather than competitive career options, cycles, and pacing. For the moment, most of us spend a lot more time developing our leadership skills at work than we do applying them at home. We spend a lot of time motivating and engaging our professional teams. We hold team building days, strategy sessions, visioning groups. And yet, how many of us do this with the most important team in our lives, our personal partner? Until recently, men weren't really raised with relationships as a key focus, and most women were. Some men are still saddled with breadwinner mindsets, even if their wives earn more than they do. And a lot of ambitious women will discover sometime in their life that they actually only had 2 choices: between a super supportive spouse or none. Anything in between is a career and morale sapping mess. So this has created some tension between the sexes, as women start demanding more intimacy from men who've been raised to be more solid, silent oak than weeping willow. Witness the explosion of gray divorce of women in their 50s and 60s who discover mortality in empty nests and decide that mediocre marriages are so yesterday. They make one last leap at late love. They know that the couples that benefit and build mutually self-enhancing partnerships reap huge advantages. They get much more than the sum 1 + 1 of 2 parts. They become 2 to the power of 2, 2 individuals inspired and supported to give the best of themselves and to each other and the world. We used to say that behind every great man was a wonderful wife. Now we're beginning to see that beside every great leader is another great leader. So the news on the whole is good. We humans have a seemingly endless capacity for learning and adapting. Countries and couples are balancing. And the reality of couples is that divorce rates have been falling for the last 30 years, at least among graduates. Turns out that balance is good for us, all, women and men. It makes us healthier, wealthier, and more loving. So the shifts in roles that we're in the millennial midst of was never a fight between men and women. It's a battle between the progressives and the rest. Remember, it was men who voted in women's suffrage. And when we're trying to change the power dynamics between in and out groups, between the way it's always been and the way it could become, you need an alliance between those already in power and those seeking to share it. Unless, of course, you want a revolution. Turns out, we've already had one. One of the most peaceful the world has ever known. The sharing of power, knowledge, and money between men and women is one of our most ingenious, astonishing, and world-shifting innovations. It's about men's rights as well as women's rights. It's not an either-or, it's a balance. So while we celebrate a century of women's suffrage, let's make sure the next century sees countries, companies, and couples defy human history and innovate into the future. We might then discover a 4th C, civilization, balanced between men and women for all the generations we have yet to make lovingly together. Thank you very much.